Alrighty, welcome everyone to our second webinar of our Crush It From the Start 50 Tips for New Teachers book project that we are really happy to be a part of. And today we're going to be talking about classroom management, as well as how do you navigate those conversations with families and guardians of students, especially during after the first quarter of the year is over, when we're getting into parent and teacher conferences or in the thick of IEP meetings or 504 meetings, so that you can really set yourself up and your students for a really good second quarter going into the new year, as it's just, the honeymoon period's off and it's time for really everyone. I mean, better word to put it is to buckle down and just really kind of get through the year as it's going by really fast through the holiday season. So I'm Dr. Matt Rhodes, and I'm here with my three co-authors of the book, and we're going to be talking about this today. So I'm going to do a roundtable of everyone to meet the authors. So I'm joined by Dr. Kevin, Dr. Sam, and Dr. Casey. So we're going to start with Dr. Sam as we introduce yourselves, and we're going to jump into the topic of classroom management and navigating those communications with families and stakeholders regarding the students. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Hey, everyone. Great to be back. My name is Dr. Sam Fessich, and I'm an associate professor of education at a small liberal arts school here in Pennsylvania. And I get to teach future teachers all about ed tech and special education. I get to see them during student teaching. So it is a true honor to do what I do, working with and raising up our next generation of educators. Absolutely love it. And I'm so excited to be a part of this amazing author group and share about some strategies for classroom management. Because as we know, the honeymoon season is over. Let's jump in and get started with classroom management. Casey, what about you?
Thanks, Dr. Sam. Hi, I'm Dr. Casey Jacobowski. I am a ed doctorate leadership and education professor at a R2 institution in the Mid-Atlantic, and I'm very proud to call upstate New York home. And I am enjoying the 80 degree or the 70 degree weather down here. And Dr. Sam's absolutely correct when I say I truly am honored that I have an opportunity to work with our teachers and leaders of the future. More importantly, one of the biggest points that we need to keep in mind as educators is that if we're feeling it, our students are feeling it too. So a lot of times the classroom management isn't because the students don't want to comply. It's because they're quite frankly burnt out. And I think, Dr. Kevin talks a lot about the burnout cycle, but also I think one of the other areas that we have to think about is we need to be future ready and be sure your students know that you care about them. And I'm going to toss it over to Dr. Kevin now. Dr. Kevin.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, everybody. I'm grateful to be here with you three. I'm Dr. Kevin Lightman. I'm a burnout researcher. I am a former middle and high school teacher. Miss the classroom every day, but now I adjunct at Florida Atlantic University, where I teach equity and diversity classes to the new teachers coming up. I think new teachers right now it's such a critical field. We all know we're in a teacher shortage. We know how important every single educator is. So getting you in the field, getting you comfortable in the field, getting you ready and prepared for what you will actually face, that is our goal. That's the goal of the book. And we're just so thrilled to be a part of your journey. So really happy to be just that small part that's going to be pushing you forward and saying, hey, you can do this, but let's also look realistically at what we're going to do so that you can stay in the field and thrive in it. And that's our goal and our hope. So that's all of our introductions. Matt, you want to dive us into the content?
Yeah. So before we jump into it, just want to let everyone know we have experience of being in rural, urban, and suburban, and working with students with special needs, multilingual learners, working in advanced placement. So there's a lot of us that have done a lot of things related to instruction and classroom management, which is today's discussion. And we've all had situations in our classrooms that Some days it's just, could be controlled chaos, or it can be, really smooth sailing, or some days it can be some of the both, same thing, both those things happening throughout the day. So let's jump into some of the, basics of classroom management. I think, and we talk about this in the book in a number of the tips. So routines. So routines are the fundamentals of classroom management, as well as we talk about relationships with students. So those hand in hand go in between, and with those two things in place, it helps us navigate situations and scenarios in our classrooms that can be easy and difficult to handle, as well as just want to mention that it all goes into relating with families and guardians of students when we talk about those types of relationships. So we're going to do the roundtable right now, talking about what are some basic routines that you can use to build relationships with students, as well as what are some things to think about when you are, setting up your class, as well as how do you maintain them throughout the year? We're talking about the end of the first quarter here, so focusing on maintaining these routines and monitoring and adjusting as we go. So we'll start off with Kevin, Casey, and then we'll go with Sam, and then I will finish us off regarding just some of these basic and fundamentals.
Yeah, that sounds great. So when we think about routines, I like to think about what can I put in place that I know will be consistent for the students. They can rely on it, they can count on it, that will actually help produce a better, safer classroom. And one of the things that I learned, and I didn't learn this in my first year, I wish I would have, is prioritizing one-on-one student meetings. It's a game changer when you think about classroom management, because a lot of times teachers are dealing with 20 to 30 students at a time. So to manage all those different personalities and all those behaviors at one time is overwhelming, right? So what I started doing is I said, you know what? I am going to schedule time. Once a week was my goal, but every other week was my bare minimum, that I'm going to meet with every single student in my classroom for at least 1 to 2 minutes. And when you think about it, it is a commitment. You have to schedule time for it. You have to plan it out in your curriculum. When can I call students up to my desk and just have an intentional conversation one-on-one? But what I found was, when you think about classroom management, you think about routines, every single student knows that they are going to have face-to-face, one-on-one interaction with me, human being to human being, not necessarily just teacher to student, but person to person. We're going to stand in front of each other and chat. And they don't want that conversation to be, why have you been acting like that lately? Right? They want it to be a fun and productive conversation. And the catch is, so do I. So in those one-on-ones, I make sure I pull up their grades for all of their classes. Anything that they're struggling with, I say, hey, do you need help? Do you want me to pair you with a tutor? Anything that I can look over for you, so that they see that I'm a helpful, caring adult in their life. But then also, what's your passions? What's your hobbies? What are you working on outside of the school that's important to you? I need to know it, and I write those things down. So now if you can imagine, over the course of a year, if I schedule 1 minute with every student every other week, the gains that I get from that in terms of classroom management, to be able to walk over to their desk and give them a nudge and be like, hey, I know you're not focused right now. You're probably thinking about that. Fill in their passion there, because now I actually know what they care about. Be like, hey, I understand you might be a little sidetracked. Can you give me a little extra effort today? And then it's going to feel even better when you get out of school and you get to go do that thing. So now it's not me coming at them, yelling, screaming, any of those kind of tactics. It's me coming there, truly understanding who they are, because I've spent the time and the energy with them to have a real knowledge of what they're going through. So those one-on-ones, that's been an absolutely vital routine. I started it by doing it randomly. And then the more I saw how effective it was, I was like, this has to be a regular part. I don't care what I have to move. I don't care if I have to cut a couple test questions so that I can wrap up the test early and do this. I don't care if I have to do silent reading or group work or whatever it is, just so I can get that one-on-one time. I fought for it and I made it work. And it helped a lot. Dr. Casey, what about you, my friend?
Love it. This reminds me of quite a few of the tips in the book, but tip 13, which is building relationships, is one of the critical ones. I think that for my perspective also, we need to really think about the success mindset. If we're positive and we're positively engaged with our students, then there's 3 points that I think about always. Rule number 1, make sure that they are safe physically, emotionally, mentally. Rule number 2, know that they have an adult who cares about them. And then rule number 3, make sure they're asking good critical questions. But I believe that classroom management is about engagement. Classroom management is about shifting that mindset from management to classroom engagement. We have to be positive about positively supporting our students, because I, as a social studies teacher, hated the fact that when I taught 7th grade or I taught 11th grade, they're like, what does this have to do with me? We've only lived through it for the past how many years, right, everybody? I mean, you get a once in a generation pandemic. So we need to talk about connecting the work to what they want to know. We need to connect the work that is defining what they make life successful. I, for one, believe that it is very important to not only greet students at the door by name, but also I think, and this is even more critically important, support and celebrate when they're successful outside of school as much as when they're inside of school. It's super duper easy because, quite frankly, a lot of newspapers cover our sports for our high school students, but, those students in band who just went to regionals, or Glee Club who went to sectionals, they need the positive reinforcement. Do you have a young man or woman who is earning their Eagle Scout or their Gold Award? Are you really impressed with the way your students day in and day out are not only accomplishing, but in some instances, they are making life happen for themselves and their little brothers or sisters because the world handed them a whole lot of lemons. Make sure you're helping them make lemonade and not creating a bitter taste in their mouth, because a lemon is good if you add a little sugar to it. But anytime you squeeze that lemon and it hits you in the eye, that's not great. I think it's important for us to make sure that we connect with our students. And, I got to tell you, I love having Dr. Sam because she is just a font of knowledge. And so I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam?
Thanks, Casey. I think every time we do these webinars, you're always mentioning food. So then I'm like, oh, what am I going to eat after our webinar today? All right. So classroom management to me sounds super huge and daunting, right? There's a lot of facets to classroom management. One, we've already talked about building those relationships with our students. Like you guys said, greeting them at the door. But I like to do with my students, I teach college students, so these are adult learners, but every Friday, every other Friday, I try to check in with them in DMs, just saying, hey, how's it going? What do you have going on this weekend? What are you looking forward to this week? Do you have any questions? Is there anything I can help you with? And a lot of the responses are very positive. Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for checking in on me. Or they might have something going on in their life and they might need like an extension on a project. No problem. I'm here to help and support you. So opening that window with like a message to a student for our adult learners has been really helpful for me, because it's just like, it doesn't sound as daunting as writing an email to your professor asking for an extension, or writing an email, something has happened in my life, I won't be able to come to class that day. But if I've opened the door already, they could just come on in with those questions and those concerns. I love the fact that Casey mentioned greeting them at the door, pronouncing their name correctly, using appropriate pronouns and honoring those. One of my colleagues posted on social, it was like about a year or so ago, if a student, it was like a little half sheet that said, my pronoun is, and they could put their circle or write their pronoun. You can use my pronoun when in class? Can I use it when I chat with other colleagues? Can I use it when I call home? That's another important one. So just like some clarifying questions with their pronouns, and that has been really helpful for them to be able to connect with their students in that way and have it be a safe space. Because like Casey mentioned, number one is, are my students safe physically, mentally, emotionally, socially? I also wanted to share, and maybe we'll get into this later, Matt, so you can totally like be like, nope, we're gonna talk about this later. Some ed tech strategies for classroom management. So I wanted to share about Classroom Screen. This one's super easy to use. Use classroomscreen.com. It is free, and they have lots of little widgets there. There's a group maker, there's a timer option, there's drawing and QR codes, a noise level meter thing, which helps keep it quiet in the classroom. There's also things like Class Dojo, where you can track behavior. We want to make sure that it's not public for everybody to see, that it's something between the teacher and the student. On social media, a few months ago, I saw somebody post, "My behavior is not a decoration for your classroom," meaning those clip charts that a lot of teachers use. Because if students here are at the middle, they can either clip up or clip down. We don't want to be using that in our classroom. That behavior tracking management, that doesn't support that positive learning environment that we're in, that we want to have for our students. So be mindful of how you're tracking student behavior in your classroom. What does it look like? How is it making the students feel? So if you're using tools like Class Dojo, great for tracking behaviors, maybe just not show it up on the screen for students to see all of that. Some other ones are Classcraft. That's another great one for our middle and our high school students for tracking student behavior and getting also those two tools. I'm going to kind of segue a little bit here, can also help with family communication, which is another topic we'll talk about later on tonight. So Matt, I'm kicking it over to you, my friend.
Yeah, so the tools that really can give you all those like widgets, like the timer, opportunity to play music, also to hear the various how loud things are getting. Those are critical, because if you're putting in transitions into your class, music is always the transition that does wonders, and you can keep it to various melodies and songs for various activities, different for different ages and contexts. You can have different types of tunes, but having that similarity there is really important. I also think embedding just social emotional learning at the beginning of class and also at the end of class is really helpful. Like, how are they feeling coming in? So you can get a barometer of what's going on. And I think just including what Sam said regarding having an open communication channel that's covert. So you can have those direct lines of direct messages between students and teachers, as well as, like Dr. Kevin says, having those one-on-one conversations when there's time within those transitions. So, and when speaking of those transitions and social emotional learning, you want to essentially keep it very similar. I mean, from the very beginning of the year, you may change things a little bit along the way, but that structure throughout the day or the class, you want to keep that fairly similar so it's predictable, so that you can then guide your students through whether it's different skills or content that you're working on, but it's predictable throughout the day. The transitions are very similar, and the students and as well as the families know what to expect throughout the day. And if you continue that, then that's really, really helpful. So it's really just keeping it simple as well. You only need about 5 or 6 things in your back pocket to there's ways to quiet students down with various types of countdowns, clapping motions. I like to do a number of them, but they're kind of cheesy at times, so I'm not going to share them right now with you all, but everyone has those that can help in those situations. But also, too, know who's also in the room. You might have a family volunteer, or you may have an instructional aide, or the special education teacher may be pushing in. So you really have to make sure everyone's on board, and you really kind of front load to those individuals that are supporting you. What are the tools for you to navigate through managing your class? What do those transitions look like? What does a day look like? And that really, really is helpful. So segueing, others in your classroom, talking more about the school community in terms of family communication and navigating, parent guardian interactions during the time of conferences, or say, for example, describing positive behavior or behavior that has been detrimental, we got to learn how to navigate those conversations, because that can make or break a situation with the student for quite some time, as well as the relationship and perception the family has of school and the trust that they have with you. So it's critical. So let's jump into some strategies. Say, I'll give a couple scenarios to you. What do you do when a number of students may have had a conflict or there was some detrimental behavior? How are you going to communicate that to families over time? What type of how are you going to frame it? How do you provide them with an opportunity for a forum to discuss, as well as how can you make it a positive at the end of the day versus, just focusing on that negative behavior? So we'll first talk about this, then we'll talk about our next bit of the segment will be on meetings and how can we have successful conferences and also meetings, which could also be forums such as like IEP, 504, etc. So we'll start with Dr. Sam, Dr. Casey, and then Dr. Kevin, and then I'll finish us off moving into the last segment, which is the meeting. So go ahead, Sam, talk to us about how would you navigate these scenario that I portrayed?
Sure. So hopefully this scenario is not the first time you're communicating with families and it's not on a negative note. So I like to tell my new teachers, my student teachers, make sure you're communicating with families like week one, if you can, send a positive note, make a phone call home. So when situations like this do happen, this is not the first time that they're being contacted about their child. Also, to kind of mitigate that situation, if it's a group of students that there's something happened, if you can try to get all parties involved or parties in at one place to talk about what happened and to have people share what their experience was, and then maybe at the end share, what was the result, what did we learn from this, that type of stuff. So I would say make sure that it's not the first time that you're communicating with that family. If everybody can get involved in a conversation that's constructive and helpful, and it's not just like detrimental or tearing people down, you want to kind of guide that conversation if you can. Maybe involve other stakeholders, perhaps guidance or a guidance counselor or other teachers who may have been involved. So I would say if you can get everybody on the same page to see what really happened, because there's lots of sides to stories. So that's what I would share for that specific situation. What about you, Casey?
Brilliant as always, Dr. Sam. It's always hard to follow you. The greatest thing that I believe is that you need to co-create the rules with your class. And I think that this is true for elementary, middle, and high school. Quite often we make the assumption as the teacher that we create the rules. However, there are some non-negotiables in classrooms, but usually the students will get to those non-negotiables, and sometimes you have to slow their roll a little bit. I had a class of 7th graders who once said after the 3rd time they interrupted me, the person should be thrown out of the class for the entire year. And I went, that's not going to work. But I also think the other point that we need to keep in mind with conflict is the parents may not want to be part of the conversation, because culturally, sometimes the school is the group where what happens at school is taught by the school is critical. Other times parents become overly involved. And so one of the areas that you have to do is create an alliance with the parents. We are all on the same page. Your child is part of this alliance. We want them to be successful. And so one of the other points that I always keep in mind is that my work day may not align with their work day. My work location may not align with their work location. My very first teaching job was in a place where I had somebody who commuted 70 miles one way in order to work in a place where they could support their family. So me saying, hey, can you please try to be at school by 3 o'clock on a Thursday did not work. So that's when I decided that it would be a good idea to have everybody meet at the local coffee shop in the evening, or even go out of town especially if the conflict is something where you may have a community conflict because of it. Just get 5 miles away. The best part is if you talk with your administrator about the fact that you may need to bring in a mediator if it becomes really deep. And again, it's reaffirming what caused the conflict. It could absolutely be something silly, or it could be really, really rooted and beyond your control as a teacher. I want to share with you the last part, which is parents are more afraid of you than you are of them. So please keep in mind, quite often as a novice teacher, especially if you were like me with 21 years of age behind you and a brand new teaching job, I was scared. And my mentor said, I'm going to help you. I know this family. I've been in the district. I taught the parents. I think it's critically important for you to run scenarios by your mentor. It's also really important for you to remember that at the end of the day, it's not about your feelings as the teacher. It's about creating a safe environment and a supportive environment for your students. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Kevin, who I'd like to know. Dr. Kevin, classroom management, especially when you are tired as an educator, must be nuts. And I know you're going through that right now. So do you ever find yourself going, I need more sleep, and this is impacting my classroom management thinking?
I've been saying that since I started grad school, my friend. Need more sleep? Yeah, I think so. But, I find a way and, I balance as much as I can. And what I can't balance, I push through. So when we're talking about this kind of situation, I heard a phrase and I turned it into an alliterative phrase because I think that always helps to remember it. And the phrase is as follows: don't be an aggravated adult, be an educational expert. And when you're dealing with parents especially, it's really difficult when you're talking about conflict because these are students you care about. And these are situations that you are so close to because it's happening in your class, it's happening on the playground, it's happening all around you. So it's really easy to be an aggravated adult and bring your own emotions into what's happening and saying, you know what, I'm frustrated with this kid because they're doing X, Y, Z. I can't believe this one had the nerve to do blah, blah, blah. And when you start bringing in your own emotions, you become less helpful to the parent. The parent doesn't need to know that your feelings are hurt. The parents don't need to know that you're frustrated by the behavior of their student. What they need to know is the facts. What happened? What are you observing in your professional educator lens? And what are the next steps? Because at the end of the day, most parents, if not all of them, want to be a partner to you to help their kid. Now, of course, there's those rare exceptions, but most parents really want the best for their child, and they understand that you as the teachers, you're going to see their child often, probably every day for a whole school year, maybe even more. I had some students that followed me for 4 years, poor guys. But, so the parents know you're going to be in their life and you're going to play a big role. They're looking for the opportunity for you as an educational expert, as a professional, to bridge that gap and say, here's how we're going to partner together to help through the situation. And you can't have that and also get your frustrations out. And that's something that's hard for teachers because at a certain point, you do want to vent. And you do want to look at the parent and be like, can you believe what your child did? Or I think they're at fault in this case, or, whatever you might be feeling. It's hard not to get that out. But it's more important to say, you are the parent, I'm the teacher, and together we can navigate this situation in the best way possible to help your child and a student that I greatly care about to grow as much as possible from the situation. So try your best. And again, I'm not saying anybody's perfect here. I know I've said some snarky things to parents in the past. That's happened, and I've apologized profusely, but it does slip sometimes because frustration does take a toll and emotions are real. But in those moments when you're discussing it with a parent, this happened, that happened, deep breath. I am an educational expert. I'm an educational expert. What is my expert opinion on this case? How can I help build that partnership? So that's how I've run things as best as I can. Understand that there's human error. Matt, what would you like to add to this?
I think there's a whole theme here, which is better together and setting the tone from the very get-go regarding, hey, these are my values and goals to help supporting your child in my class. And this is kind of what we're going to do. Be very transparent in terms of what's happening in your class, and allowing them to see that and being very forward with it up front. And then in terms of communication is that nowadays everyone's trying to email you 24/7 or send you a direct message through various types of applications. So be sure to don't be the teacher that always is responding immediately. Give some time to de-escalate yourself, as well as for the situation to de-escalate in your classroom. And if you set the precedent of being overly communicative to parents and families, the expectation will arise where you will need to communicate with them all the time, or they'll start thinking that something's going on that you need to take care of. So be sure to set that boundary in terms of that communication. Say, I'm going to set this time of day to send out these communications, and then try and send it out through, a lot of it is through our learning management system. Kind of give a summary of the day, kind of outline, here's XYZ that's happened. And then, respond to some certain requests here and there. So really keep that in mind, because setting that tone is huge in that partnership from the very get-go. And when you enter, a meeting, which we're going to segue to, just, one or two tips about navigating these meetings is come in and be really positive. Start out with the really positive things that have happened. Don't focus on the negative. I've been guilty of talking about the negative things first and setting a negative tone for the meeting, which ultimately didn't have a really good resounding result for all the parties involved. So really want to start off with a lot of positives to start off, and then focusing on how can we come together to help support the child. If it was something that is academically somewhere they need to work on, as well as possibly behaviorally, and then include the stakeholders in the school. And don't be afraid to ask for help if the situation gets out of hand. Ask for help and have those open lines of communications with administration, security, so that you can get that backup support just in case, if, God forbid something happens, because you never know what can happen. So I think we got a really good summary of just that piece of communication. So as we finalize today, let's talk about the meetings. I kind of started us with a couple of ideas relating to start off with the positives at the meeting. So how about everyone gives, one or two really quick tips of navigating these meetings, whether it's a parent conference, IEP, or 504 meeting. So we'll start with Kevin, Dr. Casey, and then Dr. Sam, and then I'll finish us off. So go ahead.
Sure. So now being a parent, having my first child in school, I'm starting to see it from the other angle. And one thing that I've noticed really quickly, when you're in some of these meetings, the information overload for the parent is real. And for us, being the professional, being in it, and you're dealing with this data all day for 30 kids. If you're teaching middle and high school, you might have 100 to 200 kids on your roster. So you are so used to analyzing data, and then you dump it on parents with possibly 6 to 8 other teachers. And that information overload, it hits on a real level with a parent who especially wants to do well for their child, wants to understand what's going on, and it's just too much to process, right? And I know I was really guilty of this from the start, where I would just pull up the assignments and I would stare. I wouldn't even look at the parent. I would stare at the assignments tab and say, well, your child is missing this one and this one and this one, and this is what they need to do, and this is what percentage they're at. You can already hear how that's exhausting. And now do that to 6, 7 teachers, or in elementary school, maybe 4, 5, 6 subjects, it's so much to process. And what do they really come home with? And for a lot of parents, they're just trying to take notes furiously. Okay, they need to complete these assignments. And they leave not understanding anything about their child, and they understand nothing about the teacher, and they understand nothing about the actual classroom that they're functioning in. So one of the practices I started doing was anytime I had a parent conference, I closed my laptop. It forced me to stare at them and focus on what they're saying. And then the first thing I would ask is, what concerns are you coming in with? And when we started it off with that, okay, now I'm hearing your concerns, I'm looking at you and I'm understanding your situation, then I will tell you what's happening in the classroom and how they're functioning in it, what they might be falling short on. Then if you want a printout of the assignments that you're missing, you can go home and review that later. And oh, by the way, here's 8 ways to contact me, email, our learning management system, not my personal cell phone, but ways that they can contact me, so that if you have a question on these assignments, we're not here to do that today. I'm here to get to know you and your family and your family's needs. But I'm also here to create this conversation so that the dialogue is now open, so you can email me and say, hey, now I know how to track their grades. I see they're missing this. Can you explain this one assignment to me? That's a lot easier to manage. And again, that's a pathway to partnership. What do you guys think? I'm sorry, I already forgot who's next. I get so excited about this topic. Dr. Casey, please tell me all about it.
I love, Kevin, what you talked about with the paying attention to the parent. I think the idea that a lot of meetings with the school is already grounded in negativity, and it may create a little bit of trauma for the parents, especially if they did not have a great experience at the school. And in fact, if they're facing some of the exact same teachers they faced, or even the same room that they faced them in as a child in the school, which, especially for some of our parents who are with elementary children, it may not be that far ago. It may be within the last 10 years. I often found meetings forgot cultural nuances, especially in populations who are recent arrival to the countries. Specifically, we had a number of Middle Eastern families who practiced Islam. Friday after 12 o'clock is no good for them to meet at the school, especially in the winter months, because they need to prepare for their Sabbath or for their day of obligation, which happens on a Friday. The other area is that there are also cultural nuances with the idea of what does it actually mean to be in a school. And I think a lot of times what we make the assumption of is that our families grew up in America. So be aware of culturally responsive pedagogy and nuance. I think the other area that I want to share with you for your meetings is be more prepared about steps going forward than the history or the past. So much of our models, our response to intervention models, our special education models, all look at what the child isn't doing right in the past. And yet we never really give folks an opportunity to go forward as learners. So one of the things I used to do, which check with your school policies and procedures, is I would sometimes give students what was called an academic redo, where I would actually forgive a lot of those assignments that were due. And what I would say is, let's try this next 5-week marking period. And then what I'll do is I'll make sure that the math looks like you're going to be able to pass. Because don't forget, if your students are so far in the hole that they can't recover, why are they going to continue digging themselves? We have to provide them with the ladder to get out. So that's just my thought, is make sure you have a clear path going forward.
Oh my gosh, guys, so many things. I like Kevin said, a pathway to partnership. Casey providing that ladder and that scaffold to help support students get out of that if they've dug themselves into a hole with grades, giving them support, giving them a hand. That's always so appreciated. So appreciated. I like to try to do mastery learning with my students. So if they didn't get it the first time, here's some feedback, give it another go. Let's try it again. But when it comes to meetings, I have very practical tips. They were very philosophical, like you guys. So the one was when writing the IEP and make it a collaborative document. Um, it's not just the special ed teacher's job to get down the strengths, the areas of need, the present levels of performance. It's, a collaboration. It's an IEP team, not an IEP special ed teacher. So really make it a collaborative piece. What's been really cool, I noticed one of my colleagues, what she does at an IEP meeting is she'll hook up her laptop and you'll have it projected on the screen there, and it's a live document. You can add in as you go, which is great. Now everyone has their voice in there, and of course, we want to make sure the student has a voice in that meeting as well. So supporting them with that, if they're able to come to the meeting and share, that is fantastic. As a general ed teacher going into an IEP meeting or a 504, always come in. What is that child glowing in? What are they doing really well in your class? And what are areas of growth that you've noticed? And what are some ways that we can support them through adaptation or accommodation? Another really simple one, my colleague said he has been in special ed for, I'm going to say maybe about 20 years. He shares to all of his new students, if I ever come to a meeting at your school and everybody else has coffee but the parents, or everybody else has water but the parents, you better offer that parent some water, coffee, tea. You're a team. Offer them that, or have it available in the room. Also, seating. So be aware of the seating in a meeting. Seating in a meeting, that was cool. So if all the ed people are on one side and parents are on the other, it looks like a us versus them type situation. Go sit by the parent. Just go sit by them. Let them know that it just shows that you're on their side, you're on their team. So 3 simple things: make a collaborative IEP document, offer them something to drink if everybody else has something to drink, like water, coffee, tea, and be aware of the seating in the space. So those are my 3.
Wow, everyone. This is just such a plethora of information that's super helpful, from the philosophical, practical, to how do you navigate certain situations. So I guess my last just tip for this would be to have basically a schedule for the meeting, especially if it's an IEP meeting or 504 or even a parent conference. Have just a little schedule of just kind of the major points that you're going over. And then if you want, send it to the parents beforehand. Or if it's a draft IEP or draft meeting document, you can send it to them beforehand, or even data relating to students' progress. Send it beforehand. Let the parents or family digest and then come to the meeting, and then use the meeting as the forum, like, hey, do you have any questions? How can we further collaborate? And then what, are our steps moving forward at this point? So that's just kind of my practical tips at the very end. So as we finish out our discussion today, we outlined a lot of different types of tips that we go in further in depth in the book, Crush It From the Start, 50 Tips for New Teachers. And we have so much more that we're going to discuss in these future webinars, and we hope to connect with future teachers, whether you're pre-service or you're new in the classroom, you're an intern, you're an alternative ed program, you're a professor of education in a teaching credentialing program, an administrator that has new teachers on campus, or an induction program. We're here to help support you and your teachers, not only to get them, their feet wet, but also to help them put themselves in the position, as well as your school, to create sustainable opportunities for your teacher and teaching conditions for them to succeed. So we want to build people up, but we also want to build out the system so that it can be sustainable for them. So any last words, anyone, before we go? Kevin, Casey, and Dr. Sam, any last words?
I'm just, again, I think I speak for all of us when I say we are grateful for the opportunity to help new teachers, assist in that start of the journey. It is such a huge learning curve, from what you learned in college to what you actually experience, even on your first day. So, we're grateful for that opportunity. We love being here to support you in that journey. We've done an excellent job in this book, and I don't usually brag, but I truly believe in these three educators that are sitting with me today, that we have provided so many good resources that aren't just research-based. They are, but they're also practical and from lived experience that will help you through what you're going to actually experience. And these are the things that are typically left out of those college programs. So we really hope that this gives you what you need, not only to get in the profession and get your feet wet, but to feel confident and feel good about what you're doing. So that's my 10 cents. If anybody else has anything to add as well, please jump in.
All righty. Well, with that said, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a fantastic day, and we hope to connect with you soon. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks for watching and learning with us at SchoolRubric with educators from across the globe. For more access to articles, magazines, podcasts, live episodes, our international school directory, courses, and more, visit us at schoolrubric.org. Thank you.